I too need money for my porn bookstore if anyone wants to give it to me.
Yeah, jeez.
Books, 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 books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast brought to you by a couple of saucy dames. I am your host, Grace Todd, and with me again this week is Drew Necci.
Hello.
Hi, darling.
Yeah, so
How are you? You left us.
I
You
left
left us
hanging.
on the edge of our seats. There
Yep.
was gun violence. There were chauffeur murders.
Yes, that no one ever figured out.
There was homophobia.
Plenty of homophobia. Thankfully, I think today we're going to have a lot less homophobia.
That's
We've gotten
fun.
through the really bad homophobia parts.
Will there be more saucy dames?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, absolutely.
I am here primarily for the saucy dames.
Fair enough. Okay. So, before we go back to the big sleep, as you may remember, I mentioned last week that it started out as two separate stories, and I wanted to talk about Killer in the Rain, which was the story that brought us the part of the big sleep we heard last week. The whole rare books and the bribery and the daughters and all of that. And what's interesting about Killer in the Rain is the ways it's the same and the ways it is different. Now, you may remember we mentioned Violet's McGee, the other Marlowe friend on the force.
Yes, Violet like the flower.
Correct, because he chews Violet cough drops. He is in this Killer in the Rain where Oles is in Big Sleep. And basically, it starts out similarly but differently, because this time, instead of the old general, we have a fella named Dravak. He's a Serbian mook who came to America and got started in Pittsburgh, but ended up in California. And then he bought a farm and made himself rich by selling off the oil rights. And now, he and Marlowe are in Marlowe's hotel room, apartment room. It's really not clear, but they're sitting on the bed. And they're talking about what has happened, which is basically, as you remember, a blackmailer wants money because Dravek, this time, his daughter has run up some gambling debts.
Mm-hmm.
This rare bookseller's name is Harold Hardwick Steiner. And the IOUs signed by his daughter total $3,000, where last time I think it was $5,000. I don't even know if I mentioned that. And the guy he gave money to last time was Joe Marty instead of Joe Brody. And this is the really...
It's like he did a knockoff of his own.
Yes. But we've got a really interesting little wrinkle here. And I want to read this to you because it is weird. Listen, Violet McGee says you're a good guy. I tell you something I ain't never told nobody. Carmen, she's not my kid at all. I just picked her up in Smoky, little baby in the street. She didn't have nobody. I guess maybe I steal her, huh?
What?
Sounds like it, I said, and had to fight to get my hands loose. I rubbed feeling back into it with the other one. The man had a grip that would crack a telephone pole. I go straight then, he says grimly and yet tenderly. I come out here and make good. She grows up. I love her. I said, that's natural. You don't get me. I want to marry her. I stared at him. She gets older, get some sense. Maybe she marry me, huh? His voice implored me as if I had the settling of that.
I'm sorry, we're pulling the Woody Allen special?
So it would appear. Ever ask her? I'm scared to, he says humbly. She soft on Steiner, do you think? He nodded. But that don't mean nothing. I could believe that. I got off the bed, threw a window up, and let the rain hit my face for a minute. Let's get this straight, I said, lowering the window again and going back to the bed. I can take Steiner off your back. That's easy. I just don't see what it buys you. So anyway, now we're back to the same plot. But boy, that whole he wants to marry the girl he has raised as his daughter thing, just like,
Ew.
yeah. And so it's like, okay, that didn't survive to the big sleep, and I think we're all better for it.
Yeah. One of those things, it's always funny when you can see sort of between the lines where an author has been has scandalized themselves.
Yeah. This never comes back up, by the way. Like, it's not like there's a point in the story where he's like, baby, I'm not really your father. We should get married. That doesn't happen. Thank
good.
God. Yeah.
Jesus.
But so, basically, he's parked in front of the store the next day in the pouring rain, spying on this Steiner guy. And it's the same exact passage about the cops helping the girls across the wet parts in the street because it's pouring rain. And, you know, the same plot stuff happens. And I'm trying to look through my notes and figure out if anything really changes before the end. And it doesn't feel like that happens. What I will say is it makes it more clear how film worked at the time. It is a photo plate that is missing. And if you don't know about this, I read a biography of a guy named Ouija, and he was a newspaper crime photographer in New York in the 20s and 30s who went on to become like somewhat of a respected artist later.
Oh, cool.
And Ouija, he had to carry flashbulbs and photo plates with him because that's what taking pictures was like in the 30s, is you had a photo plate, you took one picture, and you were done. You had to reload your photo, and your flashbulb popped, and you had to get a new flashbulb. So
when did we get film cameras? Like, still cameras?
That's still cameras? You mean, like, when did photography start?
When did we switch from photo plates to film?
It was already starting to come in the 30s. It's just it wasn't creating photo quality good enough to use in newspapers and such. Okay. So since these photos would be for a porno mag, you know, they would have to also be plates.
You want to get them titties in high definition.
For sure. So it's, you know, something that that probably was out completely in another 10, 15 years.
Okay.
But so one change is when the whole shooting happens and he goes back to his office after clearing it all up. It's Dreyvec himself waiting there again. In other words, we only have one daughter this time. So Dreyvec himself is waiting there and he talks about, oh, they mailed me this picture and, you know, like they're blackmailing me with it, blah, blah, blah. And when Eddie Mars shows up, his name is Guy Slade.
Ooh.
And that's Eddie Mars. And he's missing an arm and just has a sleeve that's pinned with a safety pin. And that doesn't show up in The Big Sleep. But there's a tough guy kind of underworld figure in another Raymond Chandler novel, and I didn't check to see which one, where he also has the missing arm with the sleeve safety pinned. So that is another thing he used elsewhere. But this all is pretty much the same up until we get to the big confrontation at Joe Brody's apartment, except he's Joe Marty here. And, you know, Carmen comes in with the gun in the guy's face, and Agnes points the gun at Carmen, and he disarms everybody. But then, instead of it being the gay lover of the dead porno guy, it's Dreyvec himself. He busts in, and he is this big, instead of being the old frail general, he's a big burly immigrant guy. As you may have picked up from when I was reading his dialogue, he has a bit of an accent, like an Eastern European accent. He's Serbian. And he's a big brute of a fella. Just because he has money doesn't mean that that's left him. And he comes in and charges everybody and grabs Joe Marty this time by the neck and breaks his neck.
Oh.
He dies right then and there. Also, the chauffeur does die in this one. And in this one, it's very plain that he killed himself. So it's almost like the transition made the chauffeur's motivation and the clear resolution of who had killed him go away.
Yeah.
And nobody ever caught that. Basically, Joe Marty shoots Dreyvec right before the guy breaks his neck and kills him. So they kill each other. And Marlowe smashes the photo plate and takes Carmen away. And I think in this one, it's basically all ties up in a bow. We've got some unresolved elements in The Big Sleep. We don't here. And I want to read the ending because Raymond Chandler loved him a downbeat ending. And it's like, if you think about the way this went and the way it ended, it's a bit more of a downbeat, dark ending. And nothing was really solved here. You know, dad who wanted the guy off his daughter that he wanted to marry's back, he's dead. The guy who was blackmailing him, he's dead too. The women are kind of both left to their own devices because the one woman no longer has the guy she was going to go start the book business back up with. And the other woman lost her dad, who was pretty much paying for everything for her. So, you know, now we're in this position of like, what was that even all about? And at the very end, he says, I shook hands with him and went out. McGee came out after me. We rode down in the elevator together without speaking to each other. He's leaving police headquarters after everything got resolved. When we got outside the building, McGee went around to the right side of my Chrysler and got into it. Got any liquor at your dump? Plenty, I said. Let's go get some of it. I started the car and drove west along First Street through a long, echoing tunnel. When we were out of that, McGee said, next time I send you a client, I won't expect you to snitch on him, boy. We went on through the quiet evening to the Bergland. I felt tired and old and not much use to anybody. And that's how that story ends. And it's definitely not as good, which is interesting because The Big Sleep is in some ways a knockoff. Like, Killer in the Rain's first. It's from 1936. And The Big Sleep's 1939. So it's a knockoff.
Yeah.
But it's like he got better in those 3 years, and he makes it better. So,
well, and he had the chance to kind of develop some of those ideas and tease them out.
I agree. I think there's a bit of this story that wraps up a little too neatly. And in The Big Sleep, there's a lot of dangling threads. And as we know, Chandler didn't really pay that much attention to those. He might just let one dangle, like with the chauffeur. But it does feel like there's more there. And thank goodness, because we're on page 115, and this is a 230-page novel, so we still got more to go. Now, let's go back to The Big Sleep.
Boodaloo, boodaloo, boodaloo.
Yeah, we've just gotten done with basically the shootout at Brody's place, and Brody's dead, but Carmen's not, Agnes isn't, and Marlowe caught the queer kid who was Geiger's boyfriend, and he's going up for the murder of Brody. We figured out that the chauffeur killed Geiger, and that is resolved. So all we really have left is the Rusty Regan thing.
Right.
Where is Rusty Regan? Well, Marlowe wasn't hired to find him. So he hears from Sternwood and is basically told, yeah, we're done.
You did the thing.
You did the thing. I'm
Goodbye.
sending you a check. And he sends him $500. I checked on this. This is over $11,000 in today's money.
Jesus Christ.
Even Marlowe's $25 day rate is over $350 today.
Okay. But Marlowe, being the detective with the secret heart of gold, isn't going to be able to leave well enough alone.
Correct.
And he's going to keep chipping away at this mystery, and he's somehow going to lose this money.
What, have you read this? I don't know if he loses the money. There are other books where he loses all of it. I think he ends up with some of it at the end of this. You know what? It's not a hugely important plot point. Maybe I'll cover it in my notes. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Anyway, we'll get there. But, so, okay. Marlowe goes home from his big denouement confrontation with the cops who are like, this all happened because you didn't report Geiger was dead. And he's like, look, I did what I had to do. And they end up being like, yeah, you're cut loose, but we're watching you, buddy. And Oles is like, I can't keep stepping in for you, Marlowe. You got to straighten up. So, sort of the same thing we saw at the end of Killer in the Rain. Well, Marlowe goes home. It's late. Eddie Mars's people are there, the same guys who were with him when he showed up at Geiger's house earlier. And they're like, the boss wants to see you.
I'm loving your Your mobster voices.
Oh, we're going to do... there's some dialogue coming, and I'm going to read you a long passage of dialogue, so you'll get to hear me do some more voices. But yeah. Let's see. So, he basically stands off Eddie Mars's guys, and they let him go. And he's like, all right. And so he goes up to his apartment. Eddie Mars calls him on the phone. He's like, oh, so you blew off my guys. And he's like, yeah, you got something to say to me, you say it. And he's like, well, I'm not going to say it on the phone. Come down to my gambling house tomorrow. I've got a tip about Rusty Regan. And Marlowe's like, I don't know why I care. I've already been paid. I shouldn't mess with this. But I'm gonna. So he goes down to, I've got this written down in my notes. He goes back to his office the next day and gets melancholy.
Oh.
Let me see if I've got that. Yeah, I wrote down the page. I'll just read you this. This is classic Philip Marlowe. I didn't go near the Sternwood family. I went back to the office and sat in my swivel chair and tried to catch up on my foot dangling. There was a gusty wind blowing in the windows, and the soot from the oil burners of the hotel next door was downdrafted into the room and rolling across the top of the desk like tumbleweed drifting across a vacant lot. I was thinking about going out to lunch and that life was pretty flat and that it would probably be just as flat as if I took a drink, and that taking a drink all alone at that time of day wouldn't be any fun anyway. So, he's just bummed. He's like, I don't know.
I'm a man with feelings and I don't know what to do with them.
And so he gets the call that the check is on its way from Sternwood, and the general wants him to come out so he can thank him in person. And he calls Eddie Mars back and is like, look, I'm coming out there. So he's like, I'm going to figure this out. And he goes out to this place in Las Olindas called Cypress Club. And it's just a rotting old mansion that used to be a rich man's summer house. And Eddie Mars picked it up for a song when they didn't want to do the repairs. And now it's a casino. And so they take Marlowe back to the boss's office. And Eddie Mars is like, I owe you, kid. You kept my name out of it. And he's like, I don't want any money from you. I didn't do it for you. There's no reason to bring you into it. You didn't actually do anything. So he has a code. He's not going to take Eddie Mars's dirty money, even though Eddie Mars is offering it to him, because he doesn't consider it to have been something he did for Eddie Mars, and he doesn't even want to think of himself as a guy who does things for guys like Eddie Mars. So, basically, he just asks him for info about Regan, and Eddie Mars doesn't know much, but when he brings up, I hear your wife ran off with him, he's kind of like,
He's like, I didn't really like her anyway.
Well, this doesn't sit right with Marlowe. He's like, why would he be like that? Well, he ends up leaving the office, and before he leaves the place, out on the big casino floor, he sees Vivian. She's gambling. And Eddie Mars has already complained about her because his attitude is like, this rich bitch comes up to my club, and she takes it off me, and I pay her. And then she comes up to my club the next night, and I take it off her, and she gives me an IOU she doesn't intend to pay. So either way, I lose. But I can't throw her out because she's, somebody in town.
Fucking rich people.
Yeah. So he's annoyed by it. Well, Marlowe goes out on the floor, and Vivian is taking it off of Eddie Mars to the point where they have to call Mars out of his office while Marlowe's watching Vivian on the floor and have him lay out some money out of his wallet because the table doesn't have enough money to cover her bet on roulette. And she's like, put it all on red, and boom, she hits. She's taken the casino off of 16 grand. No, I'm sorry. She bet 16 grand. Eddie Mars had to cover it, and she won. So she has taken them off for $32,000. Which is $750,000.
Oh,
today.
my God.
So she's just like raked it in. Marlowe's like, wow, I'm going to go outside and watch, see what happens when she leaves. And it turns out this is smart because there's a masked man hiding out in the trees outside of the mansion. And he hears a woman coming along the path, and the masked man proceeds to mug her, takes her purse. And Marlowe rolls up on him and puts a pipe in his back and pretends it's a gun. And is basically like,
classic.
I know you. Give me that. And knows the guy's name. I don't know how. I'm assuming this is just a general tough Marlowe's had to run in with before.
A lackey.
Yep. So he goes back to Vivian and is like, I got your purse for you. She didn't know he was there. So I want to do a little bit. Now, if you're familiar, and we'll probably talk about this a little more before the end of the episode, but if you're familiar with The Big Sleep at all, you're probably mainly familiar with the movie starring Humphrey Bogart. And Lauren Bacall plays this character, and there's a lot done in the movie to try and set up a romance between the Lauren Bacall character of Vivian and the Marlowe character of Humphrey Bogart. That's not in this book.
If it was a movie in this era, they were gonna shoehorn a fucking romance into it somehow, somewhere.
Yeah, and the thing that kills me is that I watched The Big Sleep in preparation for this episode, and like I said, we can talk more about it when we get done with the book. I found every change from the book's narrative was done to make Marlowe seem sexier and to make the love story between he and Vivian more real, which all felt like it took away from the natural noir crime flavor of the novel, and to me felt directly antithetical to Chandler's purpose. The best parts of the movie, they're repeating word for word the dialogue from this book.
But how are we gonna get dames in the cinema if there's no kissing?
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. So he rolls up and gives Vivian back her purse. Nice work, Marlowe. Are you my bodyguard now? Her voice had a harsh note. Looks that way. Here's the bag. She took it. I said, have you a car with you? She laughed. I came with a man. What are you doing here? Eddie Mars wanted to see me. I didn't know you knew him. Why? Oh, I don't mind telling you. He thought I was looking for somebody he thought had run away with his wife. Were you? No. Then what did you come here for? To find out why he thought I was looking for somebody he thought had run away with his wife. Did you find out? No. You leak information like a radio announcer, she said. I suppose it's none of my business even if the man was my husband. I thought you weren't interested in that. People keep throwing it at me. She clicked her teeth in annoyance. The incident of the masked man with the gun seemed to have made no impression on her at all. Well, take me to the garage, she said. I have to look in at my escort. Well, the escort in question is sloshed in the back seat of his car, just passed out. People are keeping an eye on the guy, but there's no way he's taking anybody anywhere anytime soon. So Marlowe takes her. They're going to go home. He's going to take her home. But first, they stop by a drugstore, and Marlowe buys a pint, booze. And then they sit down at the lunch counter, and they're like, coffee. And the guy's like, you can't drink in here. And they're like, okay. And then they spike the thing anyway, and the guy's like, you people. But he doesn't throw them out. And I want to read you a little more dialogue here. There's just so much great dialogue, great lines in the plot. Like, it's just so well written on a sentence-by-sentence level. This is why I love this man. All right. So you shoot people, she said quietly. You're a killer. Me? How? The papers and the police fixed it up nicely, but I don't believe everything I read. Oh, you think I accounted for Geiger or Brody or both of them? She didn't say anything. I didn't have to, I said. I might have, I suppose, and got away with it. Neither of them would have hesitated to throw lead at me. That makes you just a killer at heart, like all cops. Ah, nuts. One of those dark, deadly, quiet men who have no more feelings than a butcher has for slaughtered meat. I knew it the first time I saw you. You've got enough shady friends to know different. They're all soft compared to you. Thanks, lady. You're no English muffin yourself. Let's get out of this rotten little town. I paid the check, put the bottle of rye in my pocket, and we left. The clerk still didn't like me. So,
You're no English muffin yourself.
yeah, see, this is what I'm saying. The writing is just so great, you can just get lost in it. It's so much fun to read Raymond Chandler. But more importantly, there's an element I think is at work there that becomes much clearer as this goes on. But it's clear Vivian thinks he's some kind of tough gangster. And that's not Marlowe. We know that by now. But that's what she thinks. And she thinks he killed somebody and got away with it by pinning it on somebody else. The chauffeur who's dead anyway. Or Brody who's dead anyway. And it's not true. We know it's not true. But she's convinced it's true. And she thinks it's hot.
Yeah. She spent so much time around other murderous men that she just...
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So they drive out to the beach, and Vivian throws herself at him. And they start making out. And she's like, you got a place? And he's like, yeah, I got a place. Look, what does Eddie Mars have on you? And she's like, no! Why do you keep doing this? And he's like, I want to know what's really going on here. Where is your husband? Where is his wife?
She is like, I am just trying to get some dick.
And she's like, yeah, take me home.
And you are making this so hard for
Right.
no reason.
Right. I just came down here to have a good time, and I'm feeling so attacked right now.
And he's like, I have principles, and I care about mysteries.
Correct. I think I've even got a line here where he says something about that. What makes you think he has anything on me? She whispered, her voice muffled by the handkerchief. He lets you win a lot of money and sends a gun poke around to take it back for him. You're not more than mildly surprised. You didn't even thank me for saving it for you. I think the whole thing was just some kind of an act. If I wanted to flatter myself, I'd say it was at least partly for my benefit. You think he can win or lose as he pleases? Sure, on even money bets, 4 times out of 5. Do I have to tell you I loathe your guts, Mr. Detective? You don't owe me anything. I'm paid off. She tossed the shredded handkerchief out the car window. You have a lovely way with women. I liked kissing you. You kept your head beautifully. That's so flattering. Should I congratulate you or my father? I liked kissing you. Her voice became an icy drawl. Take me away from here if you will be so kind. I'm quite sure I'd like to go home. You won't be a sister to me? If I had a razor, I'd cut your throat. So, that's how we leave it. This is the character they made Lauren Bacall.
Women only want one thing.
Yeah, I mean, as a woman, I can say that that one thing is important, but it doesn't really get us where we need to go. It's it's kind of an easy commodity, if you ask me.
That is true.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when there's private eyes rattling around. Like, you know.
Right. Well, so Marlowe takes Vivian back to the Sternwood mansion, and then he goes home. And thank goodness he didn't take Vivian there, because who's there?
Uh-oh.
Her sister.
Uh-oh.
She's in his bed. She's naked. She bribed the manager. He let her in. I don't even know if she bribed him. She might have just been like, baby, let me in. And he's like, sure, sister. And it's like, he has a code. He's not going to mess with her either. So he throws her out, which is interesting because this is not what a lot of these other novels consist of. Generally, the private eyes are, and we talked about this, he has more of a code than most. And I think Raymond Chandler would say that's what differentiates his stuff from a lot of other people. Personally, I think he's just a better wordsmith. But, I don't know that it would ruin Marlowe if Marlowe boinked one or both of the sisters on this night.
Well, I mean, that's without knocking Chandler's writing, like, what could possibly be more of a wish fulfillment than I'm a man who has women throwing themselves at me and I'm so secure and manly that I don't even need to have sex with them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because like that is also kind of a cliche of detective novels, that every woman wants him kind of thing. And yeah, there is a certain amount of like, oh, please give it a rest. I think it's to Chandler's credit that it never really feels like that when you're reading it.
Yeah.
You don't start being like, geez, every one of these women want him. Like, it's done subtly. So anyway, he threw Carmen out. He's like, dangle, go home, bounce. Like,
go home, you dizzy broad.
Yeah, 100%. And he's like, I got rid of her. He walks down to the street. He's been seeing a car tailing him off and on. He asked Eddie Mars earlier, is this one of Mars's guys? Mars was basically like, get out of here. I don't need to tail you, brother. So he basically rolls up on the guy. Like, what he does is he drives to his office to see if the guy follows him, and the guy does. And then he gets out, acts like he's going to go into his office, walks around the block, comes around to where the guy is, and is like, hey, buddy, what's the deal? And the guy is just like, oh, and he's like, if you've got something to say to me, come up to the office. And so they go up to the office. It's late, keep in mind. This is like 11:30 p.m. by this point. And They go up to the office, and the guy's name is Harry Jones. He used to run liquor. He now works at a shady fake insurance place run by a guy named Puss Walgreen. He worked with Joe Brody. Joe's dead, but Agnes is kicked loose, and Agnes came looking for Harry because, you know, these dames, what are they going to do? They got to find another man to mob up with. So, basically, Jones says Agnes knows where Eddie Marr's wife is. And he tells this whole story. I want to read you a little bit of this because the dialogue is just so much fun. I had written down that I was going to read you like 4 pages of it, but we don't have that kind of time. Anyway, let's get into it. The little man wasn't so dumb after all. A 3 for a quarter grifter wouldn't even think such thoughts, much less know how to express them. We're jumping in there. I said, so Rusty ran away. He started to run away, maybe, with this girl Mona. She wasn't living with Eddie Mars, didn't like his rackets, especially the sidelines like blackmail, bent cars, hideouts for hot boys from the East, and so on. The talk was Regan told Eddie one night right out in the open that if he ever messed Mona up in any criminal rap, he'd be around to see him. Most of this is on the record, Harry, I said. You can't expect money for that. I'm coming to what isn't. So Regan blew. I used to see him every afternoon in Vardy's, drinking Irish whiskey and staring at the wall. He don't talk much anymore. He'd give me a bet now and then, which was what I was there for, to pick up bets for Puss Walgreen. I thought he was in the insurance business. That's what it says on the door. I guess he'd sell you insurance at that if you tramped on him. Well, about the middle of September, I don't see Regan anymore. I don't notice it right away. You know how it is. The guy's there and you see him, and then he ain't there, and you don't not see him until something makes you think of it. What makes me think about it is I hear a guy say, laughing, that Eddie Mars' woman lammed out with Rusty Regan, and Mars is acting like he was best man instead of being sore. So I tell Joe Brody, and Joe was smart. Like hell he was. Not copper smart, but still smart. He's out for the dough. He gets to figuring he could get a line somehow on the 2 lovebirds. He could maybe collect twice. Once from Eddie Mars, once from Regan's wife. Joe knew the family a little. $5,000 worth, I said. He nicked them for that a while back. Yeah? Harry Jones looked mildly surprised. Agnes ought to have told me that. There's a frail for you, always holding out. Well, Joe and me watch the papers, and we don't see anything, so we know old Sternwood has a blanket on it. Then one day I see Lash Canino in Vardy's. Know him? I shook my head. There's a boy that is tough like some guys think they're tough. He does a job for Eddie Mars when Mars needs him. Troubleshooting. He'd bump a guy off between drinks. When Mars don't need him, he don't go near him. And he don't stay in L.A. Well, it might be something and it might not. Maybe they got a line on Regan and Mars has just been sitting back with a smile on his puss, waiting for the chance. Then again, it might be something else entirely. Anyway, I tell Joe. And Joe gets on Canino's tail. He can tail. Me, I'm no good at it. I'm giving that one away, no charge. And Joe tails Canino out to the Sternwood place, and Canino parks outside the estate, and a car comes up beside him with a girl in it. They talk for a while, and Joe thinks the girl passes something over, like maybe dough. The girl beats it. It's Regan's wife. Okay, she knows Canino, and Canino knows Mars. So Joe figures Canino knows something about Regan and is trying to squeeze a little on the side for himself. Canino blows, Joe loses him. End of Act 1. What does this Canino look like? Short, heavy set, brown hair, brown eyes, always wears brown clothes and a brown hat. Even wears a brown suede raincoat, drives a brown coupe, everything brown for Mr. Canino. And I was going to go a little farther with that. It's fun, but like, yeah, you get the vibe. Yeah. And Lash Canino is important. What we're about to find out that this, okay, what's really interesting here is we're plunging into story number 2 that this was cannibalized from. It's called The Curtain. And Lash Canino only showing up 2/3 of the way into the book kind of plays into the fact that he's an important bad guy in The Curtain, but he didn't have a role in Killer in the Rain for obvious reasons, so all of a sudden he's here.
2 short stories in a trench coat.
There you go. So basically, Harry Jones wants money in exchange for what Brody figured out about Mona. Jones thinks Mars had Regan killed, and Marlowe's like, get the hell out of here. Well, Jones tells him a backstory, and we got part of that. But Agnes knows where Mona is. She was out riding with Joe Brody one day, and they saw her in a car and tailed her. And where they went was they went out to a town called Rialito. It's way out in the country. Well, we don't find that out right away. I feel like he tells them a certain amount. Oh, they tailed her. They know where she is. And then he's like, but we need $200 for the rest.
Mm-hmm.
That's $4,500 in today's dollars. So that's fun.
Just a little extortion.
Yeah. Well, they need money. They need to go set up the porn bookstore in some other town. Agnes needs to bounce before they kill her, you know?
I, too, need money for my porn bookstore if anyone wants to give it to me.
Yeah, jeez. So, he's like, meet me at Puss Walgreen's office, like, in an hour or something like that. It's late, like, after midnight. And Marlowe goes over there. And Harry was supposedly going to go pick Agnes up and then meet Marlowe back at the office. Well, when he gets there, he hears people talking. And he's like, oh, this isn't good. I don't want to just bust in on this. I don't know what's up. He goes around to the other door to the office, and that one's unlocked. And that room's dark. He goes in and just listens through the connecting door.
Sneaky.
Mm-hmm. And Chandler is really good at this kind of quiet, dark moment where everybody's having to sneak around on very soft shoes in order to, like, not get caught and learn some information. So this is a really good atmospheric scene. I really loved it. Anyway, what he hears is this is Canino. He is interrogating Harry Jones, and he knows Jones went to see Marlowe. What's he selling? Canino wants Agnes. He pulls a gun on Jones. Jones is like, she's at this apartment. He's like, I knew you'd stand up for me, Harry. Have a drink. And Jones takes the drink and throws up and collapses on the floor. Canino laughs and leaves.
Oh, no!
Yeah, Marlowe comes in. Jones has been poisoned. Cyanide. So Marlowe's like, oh, crap. And he's on directory assistance. Like, get me this place. Because he heard where Agnes is. Gets her on the phone. And basically, he tells her, look, you've got to run. Canino's coming for you. We'll meet in a half hour. And so the part where he learns where Mona is.
Agnes, no. Run.
Yeah, I don't remember. I feel like, as I said way back when she was introduced, I don't feel like she dies in this. But honestly, I can't remember for sure. So, let's see this. I liked this part a lot. I'm leaving, Copper. I'm on my way. This is getaway steak, and God, how I need it. What happened to Harry? I told you, he ran away. Canino got wise to him somehow. Forget Harry. He doesn't want to tell her he's dead.
Right.
I've paid. I want my information. You'll get it. Joe and I were out riding Foothill Boulevard. Sunday before last, it was late. The lights coming up and the usual mess of cars. We passed a brown coupe and I saw the girl who was driving it. There was a man beside her, a short, dark man. The girl was a blonde. I'd seen her before. It was Eddie Mars's wife. The guy was Canino. You wouldn't forget either of them if you ever saw him. Joe tailed the coupe from in front. He was good at that. So that's 2 praises for Joe's tailing skills.
I'm really tickled by people being like, he's very good at tailing cars.
Meanwhile, he's dead. He got shot by a young gay guy. Anyway, Canino, the watchdog, was taking her out for air. A mile or so east of Rialito, a road turns toward the foothills. That's orange country to the south, but to the north it's as bare as hell's backyard, and smack up against the hills, there's a cyanide plant where they make the stuff for fumigation. Just off the highway, there's a small garage and paint shop run by a G named Art Huck. Hot car drop, likely. There's a frame house beyond this, and beyond the house, nothing but the foothills and the bare stone outcrop and the cyanide plant a couple miles on. That's the place where she's holed up. They turned off on this road, and Joe swung around and went back, and we saw the car turn off the road where the frame house was. We sat there half an hour looking through the cars going by. Nobody came back out. When it was quite dark, Joe sneaked up there and took a look. He said there were lights in the house, and a radio was going, and just the one car out front, the coupe. So we beat it. So that's the tip. Mona is off in the hills at the house next to this guy Art Huck's hot car drop-off. So Marlowe says, okay, I'm going to go up there. He gives her the $200 that Jones wanted, and she leaves. And Marlowe drives up to Rialito in the middle of the night. I mean, now it's like 2 in the morning, you know? He gets up there. It's gross, crappy weather. He slides in the rain. And hits a bunch of tacks, and they pop 2 of his tires.
I'm sorry, is this Batman all of a sudden?
Well, I mean, keep in mind, Batman started in 1939, too. Like, maybe... I mean, Marlowe thinks, oh, you need the business, huh? Throwing tacks in the road to get guys to come up here and need a tire, you know? Maybe that's normally his play. I don't know.
I did not realize there were so many road-based hijinks that used to be normal.
I mean, I don't know how normal they were, but, like, there was a lot of crime in the 30s. You know, the Depression really led to an era of lawlessness, and I have to wonder what sort of an era of lawlessness we're going to see, considering 250,000 U.S. federal workers got laid off this week. Like, how bad is this going to get, y'all?
Hey, you want to start throwing tacks into the road with me?
We'll start a garage.
We'll start a racket.
Yeah, I'm into it. Okay, so Marlowe comes up to Art Huck's garage and bangs on the door. They're like, we're closed. He's like, hey, I got a flat out here. I need your help. So Art Huck comes to the door, and Canino's inside. And Marlowe's like, look, I popped 2 of my tires on these tacks out here. I figured you wanted the business.
If you are going to booby-trap the road, then you have to at least change the tires.
Yeah, totally. Well, Huck is repainting what is apparently the getaway car from a bank job pulled in town. And nobody says that. But they mention the bank job, and Marlowe's like, I saw a bunch of people gather around the bank when I was driving through the town. I guess this is the getaway car, and they're repainting it. He assumes that. Well, Art's like, I don't want to deal with this guy. And Canino's like, you'll deal with it. Go get those tires. What they do is they come back, and Canino's flipping a roll of nickels in his hand. But he's hanging back.
Never a good sign.
He offers Marlowe a drink. Marlowe doesn't take the drink. Marlowe remembers what happened to Jones. Basically, Art is in the process of fixing one of the flats, and he turns and goes, wham, puts him over Marlowe's head. And Marlowe's arms are trapped down at his side by this car tire inner tube. And Canino hits him with the roll of nickels, and he passes out. It's not a good Raymond Chandler novel if Marlowe doesn't get knocked out at least once.
It's not an oldie-timey novel if there's not just, like, wild ignorance of how traumatic brain injuries work.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think about that sometimes. The amount of times Marlowe gets knocked out in these books alone, and there's only 8, he should be a vegetable.
Actually, as a quick PSA, I think most of our listeners are probably big readers, and I want to really emphasize, if you or someone you love loses consciousness, you need to seek comprehensive medical attention, and there will probably be long-term consequences.
Yeah, especially if it's from a blow to the head, like it often is in these books. So anyway, Marlowe comes around. He's tied up to a Davenport, and he's in handcuffs. And Mona's there.
Kinky.
Yeah, she's wearing a silver wig. He's like, and she's like, she takes it off, and she's like, look, it's, she has her hair cut real short. She's in disguise. She's trying to cover for the fact that, like, she went away. But it's like, why is she hiding out? Well, she says, she's like, everybody thinks Mars killed Regan. But if I'm not findable, then they think he ran off with me, which he did not. So we're doing this to keep the heat off Eddie for killing Regan. Marlowe says, did he kill Regan? And she's like, no. And he's like, you don't want to admit what kind of a creep your husband is. He has it done, but it's the same thing. And she gets mad. She's like, no, blah. Like,
she's like, I love my horrible husband.
For sure. And he's like, he does bad things. Canino's going to come back over here and he's going to kill me. And it stresses Mona out. And she's like, fine, I'll cut you loose. She cuts him loose. He's handcuffed. But he is free. He runs out the door. Walks over to his car. His hands are still handcuffed behind his back, but otherwise he's able to move around. His gun is in the car. He has like a hidden compartment where he has a gun. He pulls it out. His car's fixed. So he's like, cool. They finished fixing my car. I guess they were going to maybe use it. Well, now I'll be able to come back for it. So there's a big confrontation. Marlowe throws rocks at the window trying to get Canino to come out. He doesn't hear the rocks. So he goes and starts Canino's car because he left the keys in it. Big mistake. Then he gets out of the car and goes around the back of it. And keep in mind, this is the middle of the night. It's raining. Nobody can really see that well. Canino comes out, starts shooting at the car. And Mona is with him, and she's like, oh, God, I see him. And, like, he shoots the car like 7 or 8 times, then comes over to check on him, and Marlowe comes around behind him, gets the drop on him. And he's got the gun pulled around from behind his back while he's got handcuffs on. And he shoots...
All of this, I was like, did I miss the part where she explained how he got unhandcuffed? No. Okay.
No, he's not unhandcuffed yet. So he takes Canino out. He's dead. And he comes over and gets the keys off his body and unhandcuffs himself.
That's very... Marlowe must be very thorough about his stretches every day in his off hours.
He's totally like at one point, like I could just about get around so that I could like get the gun in front of me. And like he's clearly shooting from like way back around his hip, and maybe he's having to shoot at an angle. I don't really know.
Marlowe is actually a regular at his local yoga studio. It's just him and all of the 1930s, proto hippies.
I mean, it's LA. Maybe there was yoga in LA by 1939.
I think if there wasn't yoga, there was something along those lines. So yeah, it's just him and all the young moms doing their stretches together on weekends.
Yep. Well, so that's basically it, except we still don't know where Rusty Regan ended up. They let Marlowe go on the Canino shooting. They're like, it's self-defense. Mars says, oh, I didn't know Canino was a hitter. Like, oh, I'm clean, and they have to cut him loose. The police say, oh, we don't think Mars killed Rusty Regan. We don't know what happened to him, but clearly, he was hiding out Mona to keep the heat off him. But if he had to do that, like he didn't really do it. So they cut him loose. They cut Marlowe loose. They're like, Rusty'll turn up. Marlowe is like, geez, you guys are such terrible cops. So he goes back to his apartment, and he's just like, eh. Anyway, he gets a phone call from General Sternwood's butler. Says, are you coming out? Are you going to come? The general wants to thank you. You should come out. And he's like, all right, I'll come out there. He sees the general. The general's mad at him. Plot twist. Everybody's mad at him. The general's like, why did you go to missing persons about Rusty? I didn't want the police involved. And Marlowe says he had a hunch. Something was going on. They go back and forth about whether it was fair or ethical. I've got a little bit here that's Marlowe basically laying out why it was okay according to his code, even though the general is like, I was your client, you betrayed me. And so they're having a disagreement.
Everybody's always picking on Marlowe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everybody's always, like I said, the downbeat endings, everybody's always mad at him. You allowed Captain Gregory to think I had employed you to find Rusty? Yeah, I guess I did when I was sure he had the case. He closed his eyes. They twitched a little. He spoke with them closed. And do you consider that ethical? Yes, I said. I do. The eyes opened again. The piercing blackness of them was startling coming out of that dead face. Perhaps I don't understand, he said. Maybe you don't. The head of the Missing Persons Bureau isn't a talker. He wouldn't be in that office if he was. This one is a very smart, cagey guy who tries, with a lot of success at first, to give the impression that he's a middle-aged hack fed up with this job. The game I play is not spillikins. There's always a large element of bluff connected with it. Whatever I might say to a cop, he would be apt to discount it. And to that cop, it wouldn't make much of a difference what I said. When you hire a boy in my line of work, it isn't like hiring a window washer and showing him 8 windows and saying, wash those and you're through. You don't know what I have to go through, or under, or over to do your job for you. I do it my way. I do my best to protect you, and I may break a few rules, but I break them in your favor. The client comes first, unless he's crooked. Even then, all I do is hand the job back to him and keep my mouth shut. After all, you didn't tell me not to go to Captain Gregory. That would have been rather difficult, he said with a faint smile. Well, what have I done wrong? Your man Norris seems to think when Geiger was eliminated, the case was over. I don't see it that way. Geiger's method of approach puzzled me and still does. I'm not Sherlock Holmes or Philo Vance. I don't expect to go over ground the police have covered and pick up a broken pinpoint and build a case from it. If you think there's anybody in the detective business making a living doing that sort of thing, you don't know much about cops. It's not things like that they overlook, if they overlook anything. I'm not saying they often overlook anything when they're really allowed to work, but if they do, it's apt to be something looser and vaguer. Like a man of Geiger's type, sending you his evidence of debt and asking you to pay like a gentleman. Geiger, a man in a shady racket, in a vulnerable position, protected by a racketeer and having at least some negative protection from some of the police. Why'd he do that? Because he wanted to find out if there was anything putting pressure on you. If there was, you'd pay him. If not, you'd ignore him and wait for his next move. But there was something putting the pressure on you. Regan, you were afraid he was not what he had appeared to be, that he had stayed around and been nice to you just long enough to find out how to play games with your bank account. He started to say something, but I interrupted him. Even at that, it wasn't your money you cared about. It wasn't even your daughters. You've more or less written them off. It's that you're still too proud to be played for a sucker. And you really liked Regan. So
Gasp!
Yeah, that's it. That's kind of the solution. But we still don't know where Regan is, do we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we still got a couple chapters left.
Also, like, very quickly,
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that Chandler, through Marlowe, takes a minute to kind of categorize, like, the two types of detective.
Yeah, we're back to the simple art of murder here.
Right. Like, there's the Sherlock Holmesy, evidence-y, very science-brained, I deduce from your shoes that you are the murderer. And then there's kind of the other big genre, which is just vibes.
Yes, and this is very vibes. And what's interesting is, it's hard-boiled, but it's vibes. Dashiell Hammett is so intricately plotted. His books, he loves to do a trick where you think you know what's going on, and then at the end, the detective's like, that's not what happened. This happened. And you're like, oh. Hey, Marlowe is not like that. Raymond Chandler's just going on vibes. He might forget somebody died. But yeah, I honestly think I enjoy these a little more than I do Hammett. Although, Hammett's great. No negative against Hammett. Anyway, the general says, you know what? Look, if you are willing to find Rusty, I'm willing to pay you to find Rusty. And Marlowe's like, all right, I guess I'll work on that. So he goes to leave. Well, who's out front throwing darts at a random target? It's Carmen.
Carmen!
Yeah. She's like, hey, big boy, or whatever. And Marlowe is like, yeah, I took this gun off you at Brody's apartment. Here it is back. And she's like, you should teach me how to shoot this. And he's like,
Yeah, someone should, Carmen.
yeah, sure. Okay. And they go to an abandoned oil field that's one of Sternwood's properties. Marlowe sets up some cans for her to shoot at. She turns and points the gun at him. And she starts shooting at him.
Damn it, Carmen.
Why isn't... there's 7 more novels about Philip Marlowe. What happens? Turns out he loaded the gun. And he thought something like this might happen, so he loaded it with blanks. She then has a seizure. And
What? What?
Yeah. Carmen is like... She's like Manic Pixie Dream Girl cranked up 3 or 4 notches too far into outright psychosis.
Well, it's not Manic Pixie Dream Girl. It's psychotic, horny...
Nightmare Girl.
Well, I was trying to... It's like psychotic, horny detective girl.
Maybe, but like... Yeah, she's more of a problem than a solution at any point.
Wait, psychotic, horny murder mystery girl. There we go.
Sure. They'd love her on My Favorite Murder.
Yes, they would.
Okay, so he takes her back home and basically delivers her to the butler. And he goes to Vivian and he's like, I know what's up with you. And she's like, I know what's up with you. You killed Canino, you brute. And he's like, uh-huh. And she gets nervous. And he's like, look, this is what just happened to me. And I know what went down. And so he lays it out. Let's hear a little bit of that. Do you know a man named Canino? She drew her fine black brows together and thought, vaguely, I seem to remember the name. Eddie Marr's trigger man. A tough hombre, they said. I guess he was. Without a little help from a lady, I'd be where he is, in the morgue. The lady seemed to... She stopped dead and whitened. I can't joke about it, she said simply. I'm not joking, and if I seem to talk in circles, it only seems that way. It all ties together, everything. Geiger and his cute little blackmail tricks, Brody and his pictures, Eddie Mars and his roulette tables, Canino and the girl Rusty Regan didn't run away with. It all ties together. I'm afraid I don't even know what you're talking about. Suppose you did. It would be something like this. Geiger got his hooks into your sister, which isn't very difficult, and got some notes from her and tried to blackmail your father with them, in a nice way. Eddie Mars was behind Geiger, protecting him and using him for a cat's paw. Your father sent for me instead of paying up, which showed he wasn't scared about anything. Eddie Mars wanted to know that. He had something on you, and he wanted to know if he had it on the general, too. If he had, he could collect a lot of money in a hurry. If not, he would have to wait until you got your share of the family fortune, and in the meantime be satisfied with whatever spare cash he could take away from you across the roulette table. Geiger was killed by Owen Taylor, who was in love with your silly little sister and didn't like the kind of games Geiger played with her. That didn't mean anything to Eddie. He was playing a deeper game than Geiger knew anything about, or that Brody knew anything about, or anybody except you and Eddie and a tough guy named Canino. Your husband disappeared, and Eddie, knowing everybody knew there had been bad blood between him and Regan, hid his wife out at Rialito and put Canino in to guard her, so that it would look as if she had run away with Regan. He even got Regan's car into the garage of the place where Mona Mars had been living. But that sounds a little silly, taken merely as an attempt to divert suspicion that Eddie had killed your husband, or had him killed. It isn't so silly, really. He had another motive. He was playing for $1 million or so. He knew where Regan had gone, and why, and he didn't want the police to have to find out. He wanted them to have an explanation of the disappearance that would keep them satisfied. Am I boring you? You tire me, she said in a dead, exhausted voice. God, how you tire me. Well, so basically, he's like, Carmen did the same thing with Rusty that she did with me because he refused her advances when she came on to her. That's what happened, isn't it? And Vivian's like, it's true, it's true.
Oh,
and
shit.
He killed her, or she killed him. Sorry. She killed him. And Marlo's like, I knew it.
Damn it, Carmen.
Let me guess. You got Eddie Mars to hide the body. And she's like, oh, I admit it. He's in one of those old oil sump holes over there on that property. So there you go. That's what really happened. Marlo says, look, if Carmen isn't in a sanatorium in 3 days, I'm going to the cops with this. And she's like, no, and he's like, that's how it's got to be. And she's like, what if I gave you all the money Rusty was carrying on him? He had $15,000. $340,000 today.
Jesus Christ.
That's what he was walking around with in 1939. Marlo's like, nope. You paid that to Canino, but I can't be bought so easily. This is more of his code. And he's like, deal with Carmen or I'll deal with Carmen. And that's the end. And I want to read this final bit.
Damn it, Carmen.
What did it matter where you lay once you were dead? In a dirty sump or in a marble tower on top of a high hill? You were dead. You were sleeping the big sleep. You were not bothered by things like that. Oil and water were the same as wind and air to you. You just slept the big sleep, not caring about the nastiness of how you died or where you fell. Me, I was part of the nastiness now. Far more a part of it than Rusty Regan ever was. But the old man didn't have to be. He could lie quiet in his canopied bed with his bloodless hands folded on the sheet, waiting. His heart was a brief, uncertain murmur. His thoughts were as gray as ashes. And in a little while, he too, like Rusty Regan, would be sleeping the big sleep. So that's how this wraps up.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, too, because if you look at it, it's a bunch of weird little pieces. Now, in The Curtain, that one starts with an intro that he later used in his book, The Long Goodbye, which I would consider Chandler's best book. It was his second to last. And it's longer and more complicated, but the first few bits of The Curtain were The Long Goodbye. But then it goes into this whole Rialito thing that happens with Mona and all of that. And the kid, Carmen, isn't Carmen. Carmen is Vivian's son by a previous marriage in this one.
Oh.
And he's a little 11-year-old kid, and he has a target range on the place. And the kid resented Rusty and killed him, and then tries to kill Marlo. And Marlo's like, take care of the kid, put him in an institution, or I'm going to the cops. So it's sort of the same, sort of different.
That makes a little more sense in terms of the cover-up, I feel like a woman protecting her child makes slightly more sense than a woman being like, yeah, my sister murdered my husband, but like, meh.
That's true. There's never really a solid explanation of the fact that Vivian seems not that broken up about what happened to Regan.
And Regan seems like he was fine.
If you want my opinion, he probably was out for her money. And she probably knew it and was kind of okay with it, because she, at one point when she makes out with Marlowe and things get hot and heavy, she's like, yes, killer. And he's like, I'm not a killer. And, she's like finding that attractive. So that's probably what she found attractive in Regan.
She's got big pen pals with serial killers vibes.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. She probably wrote John Dillinger fan letters. Or Clyde Barrow or somebody. Yeah. That's basically the story.
So that's the big sleep. All right.
That's it. Do you want to do more detailed bio, or have we covered enough about Chandler's whole history?
That's kind of up to you.
Well, I sort of feel like I've covered everything that I really wanted to do with that. And I wanted to talk about the movie adaptations. So let's just talk about the movie adaptations. Like, you don't really need to know too much about Raymond Chandler. He started writing in middle age. Again, I mentioned it. He was an alcoholic womanizer, which is funny. Here's why it's funny. He had a wife who was 18 years older than him.
Oh.
When he met her, she was his friend's stepmother. And, yeah. And she was 50 and he was 32, and they got married, and then he continued womanizing with the girls at work. And he was an absentee executive, and he was a drinker, and they cut him loose, and he started writing. And he ended up in Hollywood at one point. He wrote a few novels. Then he got on in Hollywood because people really liked his dialogue. They were really impressed with the parts. Like I said, and I did want to talk about this more, but the movie The Big Sleep, any of the good parts in it are parts they lifted straight from the novel. William Faulkner is the first credited screenwriter on The Big Sleep, the 1946 one.
Oh, shit.
I figured you'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
But the best parts of it are written by Raymond Chandler directly. Like, they lifted them straight off the page. But so Chandler wrote Double Indemnity, which is based on a James M. Cain novel, which is another noir classic. That one and The Postman Always Rings Twice were Cain's first two novels, and they're both excellent. He wrote an original screenplay called The Blue Dahlia, and I have never seen that movie, but what I can tell you that's interesting is he had trouble delivering on time, and you can understand by his writing process, it might have been really hard for him to get each little cut-up sheet of paper to have a piece of magic on it, and he worked hard, and he was struggling because he was on the wagon. It had been like, buddy, you got to stop drinking so hard or you're going to die. Well, what he ended up doing was tricking the studio into helping him fall off the wagon so he could get The Blue Dahlia finished writing under deadline. He was like, I need cars delivering me booze at all hours of the day and night.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, buddy, no.
And
was it a good movie at least?
I haven't seen it. I can't speak to it.
Does it have a good reputation?
Pretty good, but it's not as well known as a lot of the other like late 40s noirs of the era. What I can say is Double Indemnity is a classic, and what's really wild is my three sons' patriarch Fred McMurray is the murderer in that movie. Like the guy who is kind of our protagonist, but is also like he swings for the death penalty at the end of it.
Ooh.
That one's great. That's a classic. And he made Fred McMurray work as a noir, like, anti-hero. So, yeah, he had talent as a screenwriter.
Yeah.
And his writing definitely translates over. So, I think that's awesome. He couldn't last, though. After he convinced the studio to help him fall off the wagon so he could finish The Big Blue Dahlia, he pretty quickly got run back out of Hollywood. After that, he finished The Long Goodbye, which, as I said, is kind of his masterpiece novelistically. And he wrote another book before he died called Playback, but that one was based on an unproduced TV teleplay.
Oh.
So, Yeah, he recycled stuff a lot, but at his best, he's really great.
I mean, good dialogue is not easy to do.
No, it's
and like
really not.
good and engaging dialogue is not easy to do.
He was really good at. I mean, I think you can see that. It's pretty. It's so much fun. It's so much fun to read this and hear all of these amazing lines coming out of the characters' mouths. And as you may have noticed, I got really into reading some of the dialogue exchanges. It's fun.
Well, it's irresistible, you know? Like
Mhm.
it's I love stuff like that is having so much fun with the language. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
not just fast and it's not just witty, it's playful.
Yeah, it's very playful, and I think that's his bits of magic. They're playful and they're fun. And what's really interesting is he usually let the other characters get lines off on Marlowe as often as Marlowe got lines off on other people. It's not just, oh, here's our great detective and everybody else is a patsy compared to him. And I think that's another aspect that works really well.
It's funny too because it makes me think of Joss Whedon, who is kind of
Canceled?
No, I'm to be clear, like that dude. But his reputation for a really long time was and has been like the dialogue guy. But
That's true.
I find that a lot of his stuff hasn't aged very well, and it's because with few exceptions, a lot of his stuff comes across as really fucking self-satisfied.
Yeah.
Like it's all very smirking. It's got that kind of late 90s I'm so clever.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that same level of like funny and witty and playful, but doesn't have that same. And it might just be because we're farther away from it, but it doesn't feel as smirking.
I think that's right, and it's something Chandler was aiming for. You know, he didn't want it. Marlowe may have a code, but it wasn't like he was really better than everybody else or anything like that. He didn't want it to come across like Marlowe was self-satisfied or looked down on the people he interacted with as part of his cases. They depressed him, but not in a way that he was like anti. You know, he wasn't like, oh, these people are all scum. There's a little bit of that, don't get me wrong. Like with the women who are hysterical and the gays. And in Farewell, My Lovely, there's a Native American character who he talks terribly about. Yeah. So there is a little bit of that. But I think on the whole, he wasn't trying to make Marlowe like king shit in all of his books or anything.
Yeah. I too am scum. I am scum here with the scum. We are scumming together. And isn't that sad, but also kind of funny?
Yes, and I think that's what leads to the downbeat endings. The books generally have bummer endings. Like, you get the solution to the case, but nobody's happy.
Right.
You know, Marlowe might not have made any money. This time he made money, although he got $500 from the general for solving the case and immediately spent $200 of it on buying a tip off of Agnes.
Well, if he ended the book feeling satisfied with himself, then he wouldn't have this pathological need to sublimate his emotions into solving mysteries, and there would be no follow-up novel.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I did, before we go, want to talk about the movie versions of this, simply because I think the Big Sleep 1946 version with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, I've alluded to this before. I think this is a film that is the reason people know The Big Sleep. That's the first thing. A lot of people probably haven't read the book, but may have seen the movie.
Sure.
And I decided to watch the movie in order to prep for this because I wanted to know what about the movie was captured from the book and what about the movie wasn't. And I found some interesting contrasts early on when we meet Vivian. The guy who's missing isn't her ex-husband, and it's never really explained where her ex-husband went. She's just Mrs. Rutledge. But the guy that's missing is still Regan, and he used to work for the general in some kind of like vague security sort of function that's not really explained. And it's like if they had really just let it be the same character, it would have gone afoul of the Hays Code in some way.
Divorce.
Yeah, okay, maybe. Maybe Rutledge was supposed to have died in the war. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so then they shoehorn Lauren Bacall into this quite often in places that she's not in the book. Some of this you can predict. Some of the changes you can predict. But, like, there's a point in the scene where he's out at the place in Rialito and he wakes up and Mona is going to cut him loose. Well, Mona gets mad at him and storms out of the room, and then in comes Vivian. And I was sitting there watching it with my wife, and I was like, yo, what?
You're like, where the did Lauren Bacall come from?
And my wife has never read the book, so she's going, what? And I'm like, she's not, what? She shouldn't be here. What is even happening right now? And of course, on the way back to town after the big confrontation with Canino, they confess their love to each other, which is just so contrived. And it really...
I mean, look, if you get Lauren Bacall to sign on to your film, you are going to shoehorn Lauren Bacall into as much of that film as humanly possible.
I didn't think she was that hot. I'm just saying, she wasn't my type. I was like...
I mean, fair,
ugh.
But the audiences of the time disagreed with you, so...
It's true. The cutie was the girl they got to play Carmen. She was actually attractive. Martha Vickers. Anyway, there's some other changes. Of course, Carmen couldn't be found in flagrante after he had been taking pictures of her and Geiger got shot. So she's like wearing clothes, which I was like, well, then who cares about this picture then?
Were they at least scandalous clothes? Or?
Well, no, but my wife said that it was implied that she had been naked and had just somehow covered up. And I was like, I didn't get that.
She's losing consciousness and she's like, I have to put my clothes back on because of the Hays Code.
Yeah, exactly. So Sarah may have been correct in that. I didn't really catch it, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. Let's see. There were a couple of other things. Okay, the cab driver who tails when he says, follow that truck, and he's trying to figure out where the books are going from Geiger's. It's a woman, and she makes a pass at him, and she's not attractive enough, so he's like, yeah, get lost, sweetheart. And she gives him her card and is like, hey, big boy, let me know if you need any other tail jobs. And he's like, yeah, fat chance, sister. You know, that kind of thing. Meanwhile, when he goes to ask the girl who works across the street at the other bookstore about Geiger, it's like a cute young thing. And this is before they've really set up the romance between him and Vivian. And he's like, I'm going to watch for this guy. But she's like, well, then I guess you can hang out here and we're closed for the rest of the afternoon. And she pulls the shades down and locks the door. And
sexy.
They disappear into the back room. And it's clearly a couple hours later when they come out. And it's like, what was that doing there?
Do you think they were trying to make him more of a sex icon?
Yes.
Like a James Bond.
It felt like something that would happen to a Burt Reynolds character.
I mean, James Bond didn't exist yet, but that was clearly the waters they were swimming in.
Yes, and like I said, it felt like something that would happen to a Burt Reynolds character. Like the women love him. You know, he's Humphrey Bogart. And you mentioned they're shoehorning Lauren Bacall into this. She and Bogey had been married about a year earlier. What's really interesting is she was, I think, 24 years younger than him.
Yeah.
Something crazy like that.
A lot of Bogart's on-screen romances are with women who are, like, literally half his age.
They go to the casino at one point, and there's this whole scene where Lauren Bacall is, like, singing in a room with the musicians, and it's like, I was initially like, oh, what? Can we not show that Mars's Place is a casino because of the Hays Code? But they do eventually, like, have the roulette scene, but... What's interesting is in the song she's singing, she says something about a girl's a real sad tomato. And so if you know REM and you know in the song Crush with Eyeliner where Michael Stipe says she's a sad tomato, she's 3 miles of bad road, I have to wonder if he was referencing The Big Sleep. Maybe not. Who knows?
I mean, that's a pretty distinctive phrase.
It is, yeah. So... The one other thing that really makes it noteworthily different is that in the end, they go back to Geiger's house one more time, which just feels shoehorned in. But Mars comes there, and when he gets there, they're basically like, oh yeah, we're gonna give you, I don't even remember what the MacGuffin to get him there was, but then they get the drop on him and he's like, no, don't do this to me, and he storms out of the place and the cops shoot him down, and that felt very like the Hays Code had to shoehorn that in because he walks away in the novel. Like, he's fine. So there were a bunch of changes about it, and all of it felt in the service of making it less noir and less awesome to me. There's a second movie adaptation starring Robert Mitchum that was shot in the UK in the late 70s. In that one, there are some cool cars. Carmen hot rods around in a Jaguar E, which is awesome.
Hot.
Carmen is naked in the photo scene, so it's the 70s, so we got boobies on display, and like it's
hot.
It's played in a way that it's not hot, which I think is to its credit.
Fair.
It's kind of sorted. But and the woman playing Carmen really nails the fact that she is like Manic Pixie Dream Girl cranked up way too far into outright insanity. But it's not that good a movie. And by that point, I had read the book. I had read Killer in the Rain. I had read The Curtain. I had seen the 1946 movie, and I was like, this isn't that great. Robert Mitchum was 60 years old playing Marlowe in it, and it just feels tired. So I don't really recommend it, but it is free on YouTube. And then there's our third and final Big Sleep adaptation, which you may know.
Oh.
It's not called The Big Sleep. It's called The Big Lebowski.
Oh, shit. Plot twist.
Yeah, The Big Lebowski. There's quotes about it. Joel Cohen said, "We wanted to do a Raymond Chandler kind of story, how it moves episodically and deals with the characters trying to unravel a mystery as well as having a hopelessly complex plot that's ultimately unimportant." And Ethan said, "We wanted to generate a certain narrative feeling, like a modern Raymond Chandler story, and that's why it had to be set in Los Angeles. We wanted to have a story that moves like a Chandler book through different parts of town and different social classes." The narrator that's played by Sam Elliott, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah. He's kind of like a cowpoke version of the sort of noirish voiceover. Okay, Maud, who's played by Julianne Moore, and Bunny, who's played by Tara Reid, are pretty obviously Vivian and Carmen stand-ins.
Okay.
The Big Lebowski in his wheelchair at the big mansion is clearly the General Sternwood character.
Yeah.
There is a bit where another guy who's kind of in the constant rotation of the Coen brothers films shows up, and he's like, "I know you, you're a brother Seamus. I've been really appreciating your work." And like, the dude is like, "What are you talking about?" And that turns out that guy is looking for a missing girl who turns out to be Bunny or something. There's sort of that with the Harry Jones bit in The Big Sleep, and then there's another Marlowe story that has a bit where another PI who's not as good at being a PI corners Marlowe and is basically like, "I'm looking for this dame," and it turns out to be one of the people already involved in the mystery. So that's also lifted from it. Obviously, Jackie Treehorn is Eddie Mars. The scenes at his weird sex mansion are kind of the same as the scenes at Mars's casino. He's a porno guy, just like Geiger is. So there's a lot of the set pieces and plot elements that are taken straight from The Big Sleep. And trying to get a friend of mine who loves The Big Lebowski into Raymond Chandler, I loaned him my copy of The Big Sleep, and he came back to me and was like, "I never realized how much of this they took, like, to make this movie." And I was like, "Oh yeah." Now at the end of The Big Lebowski, it sort of all falls apart and doesn't matter. It, dude, let's go bowling, you know? But that's kind of in keeping with the whole way the Chandler books don't always resolve neatly. There are others that resolve way messier than this one did, and some people consider them less good. I personally think it's just more like real life. Chandler's books end downbeat. They end kind of sloppily and messily. They don't always make that much internal sense, and there's not always a really clean narrative through line from beginning to end. But isn't that life?
Yes, that is life. That is very much life.
All right, well, that's what I got for you. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was quite a ride. Thank you for taking us on that adventure. I really love a good, like, grimy detective story, and I feel like a lot of this stuff genre fiction invariably suffers from its own success when it goes through a phase of being really, really popular.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, we hit peak detective story, which is what Chandler was writing about in that essay that you talked about in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is when you hit peak detective story, there are going to be so many shitty, cheap imitators flooding the market that it winds up damaging the reputation of the stuff that's doing it well.
Yeah, like Agatha Christie isn't as crappy as people will tell you she is. I have a ton of her books that my grandmother left me after she passed, and like...
Oh, Agatha Christie is great, actually.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. Every once in a while, something's really weird in them, but mostly they're a lot of fun. They don't necessarily make sense in real life, but they're really good.
She's very talented. I think she's better than Arthur Conan Doyle, TBH, personally. But, like, I am ready. I'm ready for us to, like, go into another golden age of detective and crime noir stories. And I think that's what's going to come when the current romantasy thing fizzles out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, also, the social conditions are ripe for it. Like, everything is really cranked up and crazy in our current culture. I frankly think the whole country's headed for a massive implosion economically.
Yes.
I think we're going to see crime skyrocket. People are going to be in the streets, like, having nowhere to go, you know? Like, it's just, this is going to create a situation where if we're all allowed to continue having free speech now that Elon Musk is our dictator, in all practical terms. I mean, we no longer have a democracy. Like, so if they let us keep speaking and let us keep writing, then I think fiction will go in that direction of darker themes, more obvious, like, street level grit and chaos, because that's where a lot of people's lives are going to go. And we'll see. I personally feel like it's been kind of low-key headed that way ever since Obama left office, but... you know, it's going to take a while to play out, and hopefully I don't die in a death camp in the interim, because, you know, they don't love the trans, these freaks who are running this country. So, yeah, I don't know. If we make it through, it's going to be interesting times, perhaps in the ancient Chinese curse sense, but I do think it'll probably be good for fiction, if that's any kind of silver lining.
Yeah. Well, and if you are in the mood for something that is gritty and California based and kind of has a spiritual relationship with these kind of detective noir stories, I have been reading The Nightmare Box and Other Stories, which is a collection of short stories by Cynthia Gomez, and it is really fucking good. It's very queer. They are all based in Oakland, yes. They are, like, gritty magical realism kind of horror stories. They are all set in Oakland. I'm only a couple stories in, but they are very, very good. And like I said, they have a little bit of that kind of gritty noir feeling to them. So
Sounds cool.
yeah.
I'll definitely check it out. I don't really have recommendations for modern detective stories because I sort of feel like it's on a down period right now. But I will say, and this is one of the many things about transitioning that has made me realize I'm just a basic white lady at the end of the day. I love the Jack Reacher books. I get such a kick out of those. He's basically Superman, and it's really entertaining. Somebody I follow on Blue Sky said that, like, all of the Jack Reacher books were based on the premise of what if a guy was really big?
You're so well read, and you're like, you know what I love? Dadlit.
Yeah, they're fun. I'm sorry. They're fun. I don't like most of that stuff. I definitely think Lee Child is on the level with Raymond Chandler in that everybody else doing it is way down. But God, they're so much fun.
All right. Well, on that note.
Now that Grace has dissolved into gales of laughter at my basicness.
Yeah. I'm judging you, I'm not gonna lie.
I know you are. I know.
All right. Well, thank you for being so honest with us. This is a safe space.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. You might think I'm crazy, but like, boy, they are fun.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, thank you again.
Anytime. Glad to be here. If you people are looking for me, I'll spell out the name of the website I write a weekly music column for, which I talked more about this in the last episode. And if you didn't listen to that, I'll bet you were hopelessly confused this whole time. But yes, I write a weekly live music column for theauricular.com, which is TheAuricular.com. Shout out my buddy Doug, who runs that website.
Yay, Doug.
He's a great guy. Anyway, you can also find me on Blue Sky at Annihilate this week. And I basically don't use any other social media or do anything else of consequence. I'm just trying to survive, folks.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, thanks again, and thank all of you for being here with us. I didn't do it last week, and Maddie will have my head for it. So here's a reminder that we have a brand new merch store on didntreaditpod.com. There are lots of sexy items, and if you buy the sexy items, then I can buy more books and keep making this show. Yeah. Anyway, more to the point. If you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author, because they could really, really use the love. Bye. Didn't Read It was created, written, researched, and recorded by me, Grace Todd. Maddie Wood is our co-producer and social media maven. Editing by Tally, a true podcasting professional, and Grace Todd. Our theme song is Books 2.0, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton. Our logo was designed and illustrated by the incredibly talented Jess Versus. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia. Reach out to us with questions, concerns, or academic scrutiny at didntreaditpod@gmail.com.